When I finally opened my eyes after 9 hours of spine surgery, the first thing I heard wasn't a doctor's voice. It was my father's voicemail. "Son, we had no choice. We sold your condo." I thought he meant to save my life. I had no idea. He had sold everything I owned without ever asking me. If you enjoy emotional family dramas with shocking twists, betrayal, and unforgettable endings, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Now let me tell you how losing my home became the beginning of the greatest fight of my life. My name is Nathan Brooks. I'm 32 years old. For years, I worked as a structural engineer. I wasn't rich, but every paycheck, every overtime shift, every missed vacation helped me buy one thing I'd always dreamed about: my own condo. It wasn't huge, just 2 bedrooms, a small balcony, a view of the city skyline, but every brick inside that place represented years of sacrifice. It wasn't just property, it was my future. 3 months before everything changed, doctors found a serious problem in my spine. Without surgery, I could lose the ability to walk. The operation was risky, 9 hours long. The recovery, even longer. I was terrified. Not of dying, but of waking up unable to live the life I'd built. The night before surgery, my father sat beside my hospital bed. He squeezed my shoulder. "Don't worry. We'll take care of everything." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my father. I signed medical forms, emergency contacts, insurance paperwork. Then they wheeled me into the operating room. The lights above me slowly faded. Everything went black. 9 hours later, I opened my eyes. Every bone in my body hurt. Machines beeped around me. The nurse smiled. The surgery was successful. I wanted to call my parents, but my phone battery was dead. The nurse plugged it into the charger. Within seconds, dozens of missed calls appeared. Texts, voicemails. One voicemail from Dad, sent just 3 hours earlier. I pressed play. His voice sounded strangely calm. "Nathan, we had no choice. Your medical bills were too high. So we sold your condo. You'll understand later." The message ended. I stared at the ceiling. Certain I'd heard it wrong. My condo sold without asking me? I immediately called him. No answer. I called Mom, straight to voicemail. Confused, I asked my nurse if someone could check my hospital file. My insurance covered the surgery, right? She looked surprised. Yes. Almost all of it. My heart stopped. If insurance paid, why would they sell my home? Nothing made sense. 2 days later, my best friend Eric visited. The moment he walked into my room, I asked, "Did my parents really sell my condo?" He looked uncomfortable. "I didn't want you finding out like this." "What happened?" Eric took a deep breath. "They listed it the day before your surgery. They said you gave them permission." I felt sick. "I never did." He nodded. "I know. They used a power of attorney document." My entire body froze. Power of attorney? I had signed hospital papers, emergency medical papers. Had they hidden something inside those documents? Eric handed me a folder. "I went by your condo. It's empty." They already handed over the keys. I opened the folder. Inside were photos. My furniture, gone. My books, gone. My late grandmother's piano, gone. Everything I had spent years building had disappeared while I was unconscious. For the first time since surgery, the pain in my back wasn't the worst pain I felt anymore. The hardest part wasn't losing my condo. It was realizing someone I trusted with my life had taken my future instead. And I still didn't know why 3 days later. The doctors finally discharged me. I could barely walk. Every step sent pain shooting through my spine. Eric helped me into his car. As we drove through the city, I kept staring out the window, not because of the pain, because one question refused to leave my mind. Why? Insurance had covered almost all of my surgery. So why had my parents sold my condo? Where had the money gone? Instead of taking me to my parents' house, Eric drove straight to my condo building, or what used to be my condo. The parking garage no longer recognized my access card. The security guard politely stopped us. "Can I help you? I live here." He looked at his computer. "I'm sorry, sir. Unit 18 Billions belongs to the Henderson family now." Those words hit harder than the surgery. Belongs to someone else. The new owners happened to be moving furniture inside. A young couple smiled politely. "We just bought this place last week." "It's beautiful." I forced a smile. It was. They had no idea they weren't standing inside a stranger's home. They were standing inside mine. I quietly turned around and walked back toward the elevator. My legs were weak, but not because of surgery. Outside, Eric handed me another envelope. "I found this in your mailbox." It was addressed to me. Inside was the closing statement from the sale. Sale price, $865,000. I stared at the number. Almost all of my life savings, Gone. Then I noticed something strange. The money hadn't been transferred into my bank account. It had been wired to another account. An account I had never seen before. My heart began racing. I immediately called my bank. After verifying my identity, the representative quietly said, "Mr. Brooks, we never received the proceeds from your property sale." "What? There are no deposits matching that amount. So where did the money go? I'm sorry." "We can't see the receiving account. But according to the closing documents, it wasn't yours." I slowly lowered the phone. Someone hadn't just sold my home. Someone had taken the money. That evening, Eric drove me to my parents' house, or at least, the house I'd grown up in. Dad opened the front door. He looked relieved. "Nathan, you're finally home." I didn't hug him. I held up the closing papers. "Where's the money?" His smile disappeared. "What money?" "The money from my condo." He looked toward Mom. She immediately looked away. Dad cleared his throat. "It was necessary." I took another step forward. "Insurance paid for my surgery." "So why was my condo sold?" Silence. Nobody answered. "Finally," Mom whispered, "we thought you wouldn't mind." I stared at her. "Wouldn't mind," she nodded nervously. "We needed help." Dad finally spoke. "My business had been losing money. We were months behind on the mortgage. The bank was about to take this house." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You sold my home to save yours." Neither of them denied it. Dad walked closer. "I planned to tell you later. You were unconscious. I didn't want to upset you." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because I couldn't believe the betrayal. "You forged my permission. You sold everything I owned. You emptied my future to protect yours." Dad lowered his head. "I was going to pay you back. When?" "Someday." I reached into my backpack, pulled out another document. It was the official closing statement. I spoke with the title company. They confirmed. "You signed the sale documents." Dad's face turned pale. "You also signed my name." The room fell completely silent. Mom burst into tears. I begged him not to do it. But he said, "We're family. He'll understand." I looked directly at both of them. "No." Family asks. "They don't steal." I slowly turned toward the front door. Dad called after me. "Nathan, please. I can explain." Without looking back, I quietly said, "No explanation will ever give me back the home you took." I walked outside, closed the door, and for the second time in my life, I realized the people I trusted most had become strangers. But I wasn't finished, because the next morning, my attorney called, and one sentence changed everything. "Nathan, I think your father committed more than betrayal. I think he committed fraud." The next morning, my attorney, Rebecca Lawson, arrived at my hospital room. She placed a thick folder on my lap. "Nathan, I've reviewed every document." She looked me straight in the eyes. "Your father didn't just betray your trust. He committed fraud." Those two words echoed in my mind. Fraud, not a family misunderstanding, not a mistake, a crime. Rebecca explained everything. While I was under anesthesia, Dad had used paperwork I'd signed for medical treatment. He attached additional documents, then convinced a notary that I had authorized him to complete the property sale. The buyers had acted in good faith. They weren't at fault. Nearly $865,000. It had been transferred directly into my parents' personal bank account. I closed my eyes. Every sacrifice I'd made. "What do you want to do?" For several seconds, I couldn't answer. This wasn't just about money. It was my father, the man who had taught me how to ride a bike, the man who had once carried me on his shoulders. How had we ended up here? Finally, I whispered, "Recover what's mine, but don't destroy them." Rebecca nodded. "I'll see what we can do." A week later, a formal legal notice arrived at my parents' house. They were required to appear for mediation before the case went to court. When they entered the conference room, neither of them looked at me. Dad had aged years. In only a few weeks, Mom's hands trembled. Rebecca calmly placed the financial records on the table. "The evidence is clear. The property was sold without Mr. Brooks' informed consent. The proceeds were misappropriated." Silence. Then, Dad quietly admitted, "I did it. I thought I could fix everything before Nathan ever found out." He buried his face in his hands, but everything only got worse. Mom finally spoke. "I begged him to tell you the truth. We were terrified of losing our house. I never imagined we'd lose our son instead." Those words hit harder than I expected, because they were true. They hadn't only lost my trust, They had lost our family. The mediator proposed an agreement. My parents would sell their house voluntarily. Every remaining dollar from the sale, along with Dad's retirement investments, would go toward repaying what they had taken. The bank accounts were frozen until repayment began. Dad signed immediately, without arguing, without complaining. He simply said, "I owe him that." 6 months later, the last payment arrived. With it, a small handwritten letter. Inside were only a few sentences. "Nathan, I spent my whole life believing a father should protect his family. Somehow, I became the one my family needed protection from. I'm sorry, whether you forgive me or not. I'll regret that for the rest of my life." There was no excuse, no justification, only regret. Months passed. My recovery improved. I learned to walk normally again. My software consulting business continued to grow. One afternoon, I bought another condo. Not because I wanted to replace the old one. Because I refused to let the worst chapter of my life become the final one. This time, when I unlocked the front door, I smiled. No one could take this moment away. A few weeks before Christmas, there was a knock at my door. I opened it. My parents stood there, not asking for money, not asking for forgiveness. Dad simply handed me a small wooden box. Inside was the original key to my first condo. He had kept it all these years. "I know it doesn't open anything anymore," he said quietly, "but maybe it can remind you that even after someone steals a home, they should never be allowed to steal your future." For the first time, I hugged my father. Not because everything was fixed. Some wounds never disappear completely. But because healing begins when someone finally accepts responsibility. Today, that old condo key sits on my desk, right beside a framed photo of my new home. One reminds me of what I lost. The other reminds me of what I rebuilt. Because success isn't measured by the house someone takes from you. It's measured by the life you have the courage to build afterward. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes trust is priceless and integrity is worth more than any home. And always remember, people may take what you own, but they can never take the determination that helped you build it in the first place. The end.